Alrighty, well, welcome to a very special Ask Us Anything. Obviously, today is the much vaunted Tesla Battery Day, and we've obviously got a lot to discuss. Firstly, Tesla had quite a few goals and a few announcements to make today. Their first one, Goal 1 was a terawatt-hour scale battery production. So obviously at the moment, they're not making very much in the way of their own cells, 0.006 of a terawatt-hour. But obviously they know that they need to basically make roughly, well, the world needs to make 10 terawatt-hours per annum for renewable energy sources, so basically to store solar and renewable energy. Something else that the world needs to do is, oh, we haven't got that slide, never mind. It's about a similar level of 10 terawatt hours per annum to basically replace or produce all electric vehicles for the world. So that becomes a combined 20 terawatt hours per annum. The total that they actually need to produce to replace all vehicles in the entire fleet of 2 billion is about 150 terawatt hours total. And obviously, as we know, the first problem is that today's battery factories just aren't up to it. If Tesla had actually finished completing their current Gigafactory, they can only produce nameplate of 150 gigawatt hours per annum, and that's just with one Gigafactory, and it's going to cost $2 trillion if you actually want to produce 20 terawatt hours per annum, and it would actually require 2.8 million people, which is a lot. So basically, you need 135 gigafactories, and that's just not going to happen. So one of the big things that Tesla said was that their plan is to halve the cost of batteries, that's packs and cells, per kilowatt hour. And they're basically looking at cell design, the cell factory, anode materials, cathode materials, and the actual vehicle integration of those cells.
Have they given us any indication on what the current cost of batteries is? Because there always has been this talk about getting under that magic number of 100.
I think, isn't it said at the moment that Tesla is approaching 100 now? I think in current...
Well, it would be on that chart if you hadn't chopped the units off.
Say, if you look at the chart, that's got it on there.
Yeah, but I didn't chop the units off, they did, because they're not...
right.
It was 157 US dollars.
He did say it was flattening out, as you can see. Yeah.
Yes, and what Elon described was the problem is the rate of reduction is reducing, so it's flattening out at the moment. And then basically the other part of the problem is that the EV market share is growing, but EVs are still expensive. So hence their need to basically make them more affordable by getting the cost of the batteries down, which is their obvious goal of halving the cell cost. And what they're basically showing here is if you stack up all the benefits of their vertical integration, which they describe later in the presentation, you get a 54% range increase, 56% reduction in cost, and a 69% reduction in capital costs, which is just mind-blowing. I mean, obviously a lot of us, well, a lot of non-sort of technical people, or, you know, if you're just interested in the cars themselves, you think, well, that's not that impressive, but that is like earth-shattering. And it's going to have some huge impacts on Tesla's share price and valuation in the next decade. Of course, we all knew that there was going to be a bigger cell, and it's funny because what they're basically showing on this graph was that you do get a cost reduction, an increasing cost reduction with larger cells. And you do get an increase in range up to a certain point, a certain sweet spot, which they've basically worked out to be a diameter of 46 millimeters. But they do say, if you look at the dotted, the faint graph, the bigger the traditional cells become, the worse they are at charging because you can't get rid of the heat. But by having a tabless design, Tesla have flattened that curve down so that then the actual size of the battery matters a lot less. And then hence they can choose their sweet spot of 46 millimeters for the diameter of the cell to get all the power, the cost savings, and yet you can still supercharge it like crazy. Compared to, I guess this is actually compared to the 2170 cells. And there it is, it's 80 millimeters, which no one predicted that, by 46. So it's even slightly taller than the 2170s. And yeah, it's got 5 times the energy, 6 times the power. So that's all good. And you get 16% more range. And I think that metric was purely because you have less cans that you have to fit all these cells in. So that increase in range is purely because of the form factor and nothing else. And I think they actually explained in every part of the percentage decreases that they were achieving were independent of all the other parts. So they're all cumulative. And there's a great image of the bottom part, which is the copper part of the tabless electrode, which is a little bit similar to the original image that they showed for their shareholder and battery day meeting. Oh, and this is a classic part of the video where it actually shows the spooling the 2 layers together. So I forget which way it goes. Can you know if it's cathode anode with the copper bit? I don't know which way that goes. That's the negative side. So whatever that is. And then you can see it's a bit hard. I had to actually take a still image because if you look at the video, it's so fast, you just can't see what's going on. But there's actually one layer here and the other layer is coming here. And it actually meets on this roll. And that roll that battery rolls up in like, that's not even a second.
That's right, with some magic in the middle. And one of the interesting things about their new technology that they partly acquired from Maxwell is that they can do that solvent free or with significantly less solvent than they used to use in doing that process, which is really cool. And there's obviously some secret sauce in there about how they're doing the tabless electrode, because that's one of their key bits of advantage right now, because it's non-trivial to do that and keep the battery structure and the electrolyte and have it not short out. So I think they're using, Elon nodded to the fact that there are lasers involved.
Yes, I think they cut these little I don't know, I forget what you call these little slots, so they slot it. So
well, it's like the left hand end of the anode is got copper integrated into it, and there's a magic trick that they do to kind of roll that all over and make it appropriately conductive. You notice and it saved a massive step in terms of building the top of any cell, because they don't have to weld the old anode tab on to the lid anymore. It's really cool.
Well, notice how I presume, I'm not sure where this thing actually ends. It's probably about here, I think, by the look of it. But in the center, it's actually been folded over first, and then it goes folded round and round and round and round and round until it gets out to the very outside, which be awesome to see that machine do that to something very fragile.
Yeah, I want to go visit the Roadrunner factory. It's probably arguably more interesting than the Tesla factory.
Yes, absolutely. This is just an image of their formation process, which they've actually taken in-house. So this is where they actually charge the battery for the first time and also discharge it to make sure the cells are okay. And they were showing in the video that they fully automated this process and made it a lot more compact than it used to be. In fact, that's where they show the process of the electrode coating, the winding, assembly, and then formation. Oh, and this was the thing, Ken, about the Maxwell process. This is the current wet process. And you can see all the plant and equipment required. And if you see the little man there, there's only a few pixels high to the scale of the machines that are required to basically dry the volatile organic compounds.
Yeah, so they're basically looking at removing step 2 into just a single coating step. So they will still need one machine like that, but they don't need to do the solvent recovery step.
Yep, well, the next process, their alternate process is that. So you're going from that to that.
Yeah.
And I dare say that's almost to scale. It probably is to scale. And it's like a tenth of the footprint.
Yeah.
And a tenth of the energy required, which is massive. And we'll see later on in the presentation what that means to how many cells they can make on a single line. So one assembly line of using this new process does 20 gigawatt hours. And something to note there is it wasn't too long ago that the Gigafactory in Nevada was barely putting out 20 gigawatt hours with, I think it was 7 lines or something like that. And they were struggling to get about 20 gigawatt hours of 2170 cells. And they can do this on one single line. So that then means that they've got a 75% reduction in their capital costs compared to a traditional 150 gigawatt hour old-fashioned gigafactory to a terafactory, which is just extraordinary that they're proposing to do that. And I think Elon actually mentioned it. He literally said he wouldn't have believed that was possible just a few years ago. So then the plan is 100 gigawatt hours, and this is of Tesla's own homemade cells. This has got nothing to do with all the other cell suppliers that they're still going to be using as much as they can, or like literally as much, they'll buy as many cells as they can make. But they actually plan to internally make 100 gigawatt hours per annum in 2022 and a full 3 terawatt hours in 2030. And I think Rob Mauer this afternoon, when he posted his video of the battery day, actually said that those 3 terawatt hours will lead to something like about $1 trillion of revenue for Tesla in 2030. And he actually did it a couple of ways. He did it just by presuming a certain revenue per gigawatt hour, terawatt hour, whatever, kilowatt hour. And he also did it on the basis that Elon had said that he had planned to actually produce 20 million cars, and then that would consume about 2 terawatt hours. And then if you worked out that the last terawatt hour was for battery storage and other things, that would also lead to a certain amount of revenue. I think the 20 million cars was about $600 billion, and the terawatt hour of battery storage was about 240 odd $1 billion, and there was a little bit extra in servicing and stuff. So it doesn't matter which way you slice the 3 terawatt hours, that equates to Tesla potentially having earnings of $1 trillion. And that's not a valuation of $1 trillion, that's earnings per annum of $1 trillion. And I think he said in that video that the company that has the world's record for revenue at the moment is Walmart, and they're about $500 billion. So in 10 years, Tesla is looking to be twice as big as that on a company that's having huge growth. So I think that's one of those astounding sort of numbers that it just looks like a number, but what it means is just profound. Moving right along, they mentioned a couple of things like using raw silicon, because they found a way of basically encapsulating it, stabilizing it, and putting it in a elastic binder, which means that you can use a lot more silicon, and silicon's a lot better at, I think it's absorbing, it's better at absorbing lithium in the cathode, I think. And it's a lot cheaper at $1.20 per kilowatt hour. And they also went into the fact that they're going to have multi chemistry. So you have the iron based for really long cycle life, and it's really cheap. So they're $25,000 US. I think it's been called a Model 2, and Model 3s. Certainly in China, that's already been announced that CATL are using the iron-based cells. And then the nickel manganese for the medium range. So S's, doesn't show X, that's ominous. Power walls. And then for the vehicles that really matter, certainly to yours truly, the Cybertruck, it'll be high nickel, where you need the most energy density and bang for buck, really, that you can get. Interestingly, it looks like Tesla's going to get into some mining. They announced that they've got, I think it's 10,000 acres of lithium clay deposit in Nevada. And they are actually going to extract it, as Elon said, using table salt. And that, according to Elon, that's the only method that, so they're the only people that have come up with that method that they're aware of, which makes it super cheap. And he actually said that what they do is actually get the clay out of the ground, effectively filter out the lithium, process it with salt and a bit of water, kind of rinse out the lithium out of the clay, and then put the clay back to where he found it, and then rinse and repeat and keep going. So it's very environmentally friendly, and it basically means that Tesla's got their own independent source of lithium. And they actually said that there's enough lithium in that Nevada site to actually convert all of the US's vehicles to electric. And then
sorry, Harold.
Yes.
Did they mention anything about the power wall?
No. No. The Powerwall got a couple of, there's an image of it, but no, there was zero. And this, I guess we could discuss this towards the end, but that's probably why the share price will be diving tonight, because a lot of short-term analysts were hoping for things like Powerwall, a Plaid Model S being available, on Monday, and a few other things, which aren't going to happen yet. So no, unfortunately, that's no Powerwall yet, or no Powerwall 2. Sorry, 3. No three-phase Powerwalls. There's no mention of any of that sort of stuff yet. So yeah, so another thing they were talking about was recycling batteries, because obviously that's a much richer deposit of materials than the ground is and the earth is. And there was an interesting graph where basically they were saying that recycling takes 10 years because the batteries will be in vehicles or stationary storage for at least that long. So, but the graph is interesting because they're basically projecting that by 2025, there's going to be well over a terawatt-hour of batteries out in the environment, which is very interesting. But of course, in 2025, you only have the 2015 number, which is almost nothing. Oh, this was another part of them reducing the price of, well, basically electric cars, is to do one-piece casting. And this is actually the Model Y Giga casting machine that's out in the backyard of the Fremont factory working at the moment. And you can actually see the casting just coming out. And this is the rear cast, one-piece rear casting. Yeah, and you can see the metrics there, 40% cost saving and, 79 less parts. and they're using like massive, the press got massive pressure. I think it's like 1,600 tons, I think. And I remember Elon saying that the actual, this is where the red part is where the casting material gets injected, and then it basically flows through the cast. And it only takes a couple of dozen milliseconds to get right to the end. And they've got special alloys that don't need heat treating, because as Elon has said a couple of times, when you heat treat stuff like that, it'll slightly warp and bend, and it's just a pain if it does that. So they've just gone on and developed their own special alloy. And then they spoke about basically changing the way you actually mount batteries in cars. So rather than it being an accessory to the car that's bolted into it, or onto it, now the actual cells, rather than the cells being put in modules, and then the module being put in a pack, and then that pack being mounted to a structural part of the car, the actual cells get mounted effectively into the structure of the car, and they become the structure of the car, which again is a huge saving in cost and a lot of materials, and you can get more cells. And they even described that you can actually put the cells closer to the center of the car because of all the savings you've got in the packing density and so on. So then basically you have sort of almost three parts to the body. You have the front single casting, a unified single battery pack that's structural, and then the single rear casting. And again, you get 10% mass reduction, 14% range increase, and nearly 400 fewer parts.
Harold, how would you see recycling the batteries happening here? Or because it's a 1,000,000-mile battery, there'll be no need for it? When the batteries get trouble, how do you see them being repaired?
Well, Tesla have announced, they said that they're recycling all their batteries, or I think that was from third parties, via third parties. But now they're actually starting a pilot plant doing the full recycling themselves. I don't know how whether Tesla would ship them back. Well, maybe, I guess if they're a valuable resource, they would ship Australian used packs back to the States.
I'm thinking more about this car here, where you're talking about it being integral with the strength of the car. How you have to basically wreck the car to recycle the batteries.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So
I think what we've discovered over the time since they designed the Model S with the removable pack is that you just don't remove the pack. The pack becomes a product that is there for the life of the car. So the battery pack is an integral part of the car, and they're moving more and more towards that. So yeah, the battery pack gets recycled along with all the aluminium in the car when the car is end of life.
I think Elon mentioned, I think it was on the Third Row podcast, that they're basically taking their cue from the smartphone model, where smartphones or mobile phones in general started off with replaceable batteries.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and then they went to a battery that was part of the phone, and yeah, I think this is just another evolution along the whole line of thinking.
Yeah, that's dead right, because he even described how it's such a waste to have a casing of the battery that then fits into the phone, that then has an over case and whatever. So it's just a waste of packaging and waste of space and weight.
And I think they're confident enough now in the batteries that they don't think
I'm going to get one of the girls
that it's really going to be
Yes.
that.
for you. Ultrasound.
Yes.
Okay.
No?
So yeah, I'll go get someone, take you in a wheelchair downstairs.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't know. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
No,
You do what
just
you want.
policy.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Cool. So moving right along. towards the end of the presentation, they were basically stacking up the benefits of Tesla's vertical integration, which, again, Tesla is rare, or is unique in all of the car manufacturers, because they've all basically gone completely flat as far as their integration is. They're not manufacturers; they're just component assemblers, and in fact, they're subsystem assemblers. But Tesla is absolutely vertically integrating, and you can see all the benefits. 54% range increase, which, I mean, none of that has filtered into the cars yet. Well, the cars in the future. So imagine that, 54%, and it costs half the price, and it costs like 70% less for capital costs. So all of these additional gigafactories are going to cost less and less than all of the ones that came before them, which just means Tesla's just going to grow at a ridiculously large rate, throughout this decade. It's just ridiculous, really. It's just not fair. And the graph that they showed originally, which was the cost of batteries sort of plateauing, or the reduction plateauing, Tesla's one is basically drooping right down. So I guess that basically means they're looking at their 50% reduction by, well, the next 5 years. And then, of course, they announced their impending $25,000 or US dollar, Model 2, which is basically less than the combustion engine equivalent. So then that just puts paid to all of those knockers that said that, electric cars are expensive and they're not cost competitive. Oh, yes. And then I don't know about you guys, but how'd you think about Elon when he finally announced the Plaid Model S? It was almost like an afterthought, like, we better mention the elephant in the room.
To beat Lucid.
Yes, and he does do that in the next couple of screens, because he goes to say that it's funny because it's actually less than 2 seconds 0 to 60 miles an hour, but in Australia it's less than 2.1 seconds 0 to 100 k's an hour, less than 9-second quarter mile. So I think the Lucid just did just under 9 seconds, I think, didn't it? It just touched.
No, 9.9.
Oh, was it 9.9? Oh, sorry, it was just sub 10. Right, yeah. Cool, thanks, Pete. And yeah, 1100 horsepower. But it did Laguna Seca in 1 minute 30.3, and that was 3 seconds faster than the Lucid did a week or two ago, or a few days ago. So that was a great slap.
I just put out a tweet with the entire lap. I just pasted the link if anyone's interested.
Ah, awesome. So then you can order it now at Tesla.com. So I did have a look, and for a while it just had the American site being updated, and I'm thinking, oh, that's typical. You can't buy it in Australia. Until, of course, then a few minutes later it did pop up, and we can all buy a Poverty Pearl White full self-driving Plaid Model S for a mere $257,195.
Well, an order 5, Harold.
And I didn't have time to snap in, but if you live in the ACT, it's only $241,000. So maybe you should get a short-term rental or something and live there for a month, and get your car delivered and save yourself 16 grand.
It's still a lot cheaper than the Lucid though, because I think that one starts at 169,000 US. So, and I think this one, the equivalent was 140,000, 139,
yes.
140,000 US.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So, was it you, Richard, that you were saying that the Taycan Turbo is about the price of the Plaid Model S?
Yeah, the Turbo, I think, was. The Turbo S was a lot more expensive.
So it's kind
but
of
they're
all
really
over.
different parts, so you know, I wouldn't really compare them.
No,
Well, it's just so silly to call it a turbo when it's an electric
I know.
car.
but then, you know, I've had razor blades that were called turbo, you know, so.
Right. Okay.
yeah, that's true.
Artistic license.
I was just thinking that's an awful thought. Seeing razor blades mounted to a turbo impeller or something, that would be scary.
Depends on the application.
But then, hey Richard, how would you know there's any such thing as a razor blade that was called turbo?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so that concludes the slide presentation.
When you work in rail on a mine, there's not a lot of need to keep clean shaven.
Exactly. But yeah, so what do all you guys think? You know, I can see a lot of people could have been disappointed because maybe they thought there'd be something whiz bang.
I must admit, actually, so one of the guys at my work who really wants a Model Y, and he keeps whinging about how expensive it is, and I'm like, look, it's going to be cheaper. Anyway, he kind of got the impression just from what he's kind of heard that it was a bit underwhelming. And I said to him, look, I think, like, I haven't actually seen it yet. I was watching it kind of live in the background while we had pre-start this morning, but haven't had a chance to actually watch it myself. But I said to him that the devil, I think, is really in the details, and it might seem underwhelming for the average layperson. But what we're looking at is those graphs, and you know, we're coming to the conclusions that you'd expect. But I think it's just a little harder for the average Joe to understand.
Yeah, I think if you've got to look at the science behind it, the tabless electrode
Yes.
is a humongous step to take, and then the dry cell production and so on. And as Elon said,
but it took me a while to work out, to look into it and read up about it, and then, you know, comprehend the significance of it. So, and I'm in the community, so
I think it's similar to Autonomy Day, where Autonomy Day, a lot of that went over people's heads and they didn't understand the implications. And the implications of a lot of this will come to fruition in 2 or 3 years' time. And that's when it will be apparent. So, yeah, the only thing that was in the presentation that's anything to do with here and now, and not even that, is the plaid powertrain. Even that's not available till next year. So, and I think that's why the market sold off. Markets usually look forward, 6 to 12 months time tops. So this is 2 or 3 years down the track. So it's past the market's horizon.
That's right, Pete, because the short-term observers would have been highly disappointed that there's no plaid available on Monday in Model S or X for that matter. Because, even I think it was Gully at Hyperchange was predicting a huge increase in S and X sales due to a plaid release literally in the next quarter. And of course that's now gone. There's none of that. So anyone pricing it on short-term gains is going to go, well, there's nothing to see here. And even Elon, I think he several times in the presentation actually stressed that, like, even the dry coating process, they haven't actually perfected it yet. And one thing he did mention, which I thought a lot of analysts or short sellers or critics of Tesla would latch onto, was the fact that he even highlighted that their yield rates at the moment on this new battery train are quite low, but they're obviously improving with each generation. I think it was the 4th generation of train that they're doing, and every 3 or 4 months they're doing a new version. So a lot of analysts could actually pick up a lot of negativity and go, oh, well, it's just Tesla talking about the distant future, and they haven't actually got something we can touch and hold and grab onto now. So it's a great buying opportunity because it just means that all the short-term people that were betting on short-term gains are just leaving the building, and all the long-term people who are looking at, you know, the next 10 years, it's just all blue sky. And, you know, imagine the other car manufacturers. I think it was said that, you know, a battery manufacturer, a battery-only manufacturer, like cell manufacturer, isn't going to concern themselves with how you integrate those cells into a car. And a car manufacturer isn't going to, or who is buying batteries from a battery manufacturer isn't going to bother about the same thing either. Like, it's only Tesla that can actually put cells directly into a body of a car. So no one's going to think of doing that or have the ability to do that for a long, long time. So it just means that Tesla's just so far in front. It's just unfair.
Well, that's one thing I got out of it, is that they've effectively put themselves. Ken's got the chart there. Is it down about 5% in pre-market? I think it was down about 5% from memory.
Everyone's talking about this massive plunge. It's kind of on the 3 month. You can't even.
Oh yes, true. But it's 3.9. Oh, look at that, it's 3.99. That's beautiful. What a beautiful set of views.
Yeah.
I actually had a sell order, a buy order at 350, but it didn't get down there.
Oh well, actually, Peter, you should have had that buy order in March because it touched 348.
Yeah, I actually set it for 350 then, and it got down to 358 or something, or 360, and so I didn't buy it. I got busy. I was on the road and things like that, so I never got to. But yeah, I would have. It would have been. You would have been a champion. I would have been. Yeah. I'd be off traveling in a sort of a different car. Mind you, the Poverty Pearl looks quite nice on that car you just showed us. Yeah.
Oh yes, it's Poverty Pearl White is a nice. It looks lovely, and it's free. Yeah, it costs you nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome that they went from black to Poverty Pearl White.
Yeah.
Yeah. So happily that all, you know, the short-term analysts are just leaving the building, and they're sort of like disappointed, and they're going, well, what's a terawatt, and we don't care about 2025 or 2022, you know.
Well, so I've got it on 350 tomorrow as well. So yeah.
I think integrating the battery cells into one module, into one pack, is gonna be a huge. I mean, I wouldn't say game changer is often overused, but the dramatic increase in kilowatt hours per pack is gonna really lead to some either, you know, longer ranges or cheaper prices. So I think that's a really significant factor, and I kind of wish they'd done it from the start, but you know, they felt like they couldn't.
And the way that they can integrate.
Well, I was going to say that having it as a structural load-bearing member that's incredible design.
One thing that's got me is Elon Musk did say in Germany, when he was sort of informally interviewed at the Gigafactory in Berlin, that he actually said that Germany's Model Y would be completely different to the current Y. I just wonder whether they're going to do this architecture in the Model Y, not necessarily the advanced cells, but they might actually go straight from cell, albeit 2170s, and do what they're doing there in that image, possibly.
I think you could be on the mark there, Harold, because all the photos and all the vision that's coming from Berlin suggests that there's a lot of those, what are we calling them, giga presses, those enormous casting machines, and I think Elon also mentioned at some point, I think it might have been in that hangar with the VW CEO, or I can't remember exactly where it was, but he basically said that there's going to be a fundamental change in the way, not just EVs, but in the way cars are built. And this is probably what he was talking about, and he was referencing the Model Y, I think. But yeah, I think this really just puts them in a completely different league, in a class of their own, where no one can compete with them. Like you were saying before, the battery manufacturers aren't interested, or they can't do it.
Yep.
The auto part assemblers, which is the rest of the market,
yep.
you know, they can't do it. So yeah, just puts them in a class of their own.
I think in terms of the Giga presses, I think China has one with a second one coming, and there is 8 in Berlin.
That's
oof. Wow. Wow.
So perhaps they're doing
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, perhaps they're doing the front as well as the rear single piece in Germany now.
I was going to say, I think where it will change is when the sticker price changes on the website. When this translates into actual cost reductions, I think that's when it will make the headlines for most people.
Yeah, that's right. Because in a sense, we don't care how many parts our cars are built out of. Whether it was just one piece of glue stick or something, it doesn't actually matter to us. But it obviously, what matters is what price reduction that gets us. Or perhaps the corollary of that is, as shareholders, what profit increase it gets us as well. But yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't really matter. But clearly, the price reduction, you see Sandy Munro when he reviewed the Model 3, and all the parts in the boot. I forget he counted. There were gazillions of parts just to make the boot section, and in the Model Y, well, what you call now the old version Model Y with 2 castings. Clearly, Tesla have now done a single casting, because we showed that last week. In fact, that was in the presentation. Sorry, that was that casting machine. So that's a single cast being made today. So Model Ys, clearly the current Model Ys have got the single casting.
And Harold, it's not just the number of parts that it replaces. You've got to remember that each one of those parts that it replaces, that part has to have a machine that builds it. So you're replacing those machines as well, and that's why they can achieve such incredible cost savings, because you're replacing. And I think he said this a few weeks ago as well, that those big casting machines are going to be replacing some 3-digit number of robots.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's right. So as big as a casting machine is, it probably displaces 10 times, or if not more, surface floor area of machines. And imagine too that each of those castings is done as one thing in one process. The time saved down the line, so that the way you can propagate cars through the line is a lot quicker and a lot shorter line. So yeah, it's a huge innovation, and by having these castings bolted to those structural integral battery units, yeah, it's just not fair. It's who else is going to do that?
Well, everyone else will be subject to the limitations of, if you improve one thing, it comes at the expense of another. Whereas they're almost sort of in this class of their own, where they're almost defying physics, in that they're able to increase the range, but also reduce the cost.
Legacy automakers aren't necessarily going to get the speed, but what about somewhere like China? Will they be able to jump on this and vertically integrate easily?
He addressed that partially. He said that, look, in the fullness of time, eventually everyone will have autonomy of some sort. Eventually everyone will have, a battery with long range at some point, but he thinks that their enduring competitive advantage is going to be in manufacturing. I think he said, our aim is to be head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to manufacturing.
Yes, because because as he said, anyone can build a prototype and anyone can sort of build a car, but it's the machine that builds the machine that's the real challenge. And I remember quite a long time ago, he said that a lot of that is about the software as well, integrating everything together. But by literally, and I think he's actually said this too, that they are redesigning the Model Y, for instance, sort of almost weekly, changing parts. Like they've already changed the octa valve and many other things. And he was talking about even changing things like how the bumper is arranged so that if you have a bingle, it's cheaper to replace parts and all that sort of stuff. So they're designing the entire car as one item, whereas none of the other car manufacturers do that. All they do is they design an overall package around the driver, like the interior compartment, but everything else is basically subsystems that they've gotten from Bosch and other companies, tier 1 suppliers, that they just sort of buy what's going. And there's no real forcing function to get those component designers or those tier 1 suppliers to do anything terribly innovative. You know, there's no incentive to do that.
It's just mind-boggling. Sandy Munro said, I can't remember who he used to work for before he went out on his own, whether it was Ford or whoever it was. Ford, was it?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think he said, yeah, at Ford, if you wanted to make one change, he couldn't get that, you know, in 2 or 3 years, he couldn't get that one change through. Whereas Tesla makes 30, 40 changes in 2 or 3 months, just on the fly. It's just
example,
miles apart.
I think his example was something to do with the door skin or the interior, was it a window winder or something on the inside of a door? And he tried for a year.
One panel, wasn't it? He had the whole panel with everything on it. And I think it was the window winder and door handle and everything else. Yeah.
And he tried for a year to get this innovation done. And then it took like years before other companies did it, and then Ford finally caught up. But you're right, Pete, because you're saying that, you know, Tesla never stops changing. They never stop playing with, well, not playing, but altering the components and improving the product.
That's because they do it iteratively, don't they? They don't do it for a market change next year. It's ongoing, constant improvement.
Yes, there's no model year, no models, no model year models. So they just keep improving it.
Interesting, because there's a certain number in the market out there who say, well, we need a facelift, we need it to change, we need a new look. I mean, it still looks a gorgeous car after 8 years on the road, yes, but it's interesting how the market does think that you need to have change.
Because we're conditioned,
oh, totally,
yeah, to that model. But it's in the consumer's best interest for them not to have a refresh, because as soon as you have a refresh, that reduces the resale value of the car, and that's, you know, it's in everyone's benefit to keep the design as it is, as long as it's functional and it's still current.
Well, that was one of the disappointments that I saw with the Plaid Model S. There was no indicate, like they didn't show any of the interior, but on the website, of course, it's just, you know, portrait, 17-inch touchscreen. Everything's exactly the same. They haven't, I mean, who knows, they might still do a refresh later, because, you know, everyone presumed that now would be the time when they would announce a refresh of the Model S and X, having the horizontal screen format, which is better for things like Netflix and stuff like that. And yet that's all noticeably absent, you know, because it's not important. Well, I guess in battery day, it's certainly not important. And really in Tesla world, it's not important either, because Tesla has a capacity to build 90,000 S's and X's combined, but last year they only sold 66,000. And yet, you know, Model 3s, they sold high 200s or something.
Yeah, 300, yeah.
Or roughly 300, yeah. So it certainly was.
See, listen, one of the things is Tesla is run by engineers. Legacy Auto is run by accountants and marketing departments. And that's the difference. And if you watch, you know, one of the great videos on Netflix is The Faster Horse, about the Mustang. the 2015 Mustang, and it just clearly shows who runs the show at Ford. And the engineers don't get much say in the matter. So it's a good video. If you ever get a chance to watch that, it's about an hour and 10-minute video.
So what's that called again, Rob?
It's called A Faster Horse.
A Faster Horse.
Yeah, very, very good video about the Mustang.
And that's on Netflix.
It was on Netflix. It should still be there. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, the other thing too is Richard was talking about price there. The price of a Tesla will not come down while there's demand. If they can make profit on the car and turn it into research and development, Tesla are going to do that while there's demand.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I should just reminded. I just remembered that Ken had posted up on Twitter the hot lap at Laguna Seca. I'll just see if it works on here.
So when was this, last week?
On the weekend, yes.
Do you know, one thing that did surprise me, I guess in hindsight maybe it's not so surprising, is that there was not even a range upgrade for the Model X, like not even necessarily a plaid version, but a new battery cell and architecture, you know, giving you more range and maybe a bit better performance. But because I think they might be missing a trick there. I'm sure it will come, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that want a 7-seater SUV that they can, you know, go 700-800 Ks with.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So
go on, Pete.
No, I was just saying there was a couple of things that were widely expected. Some things that I had put down on my list, they were, you know, 100% were things like the 1,000,000-mile battery. And during the whole presentation, they didn't talk about life cycles at all. So
interesting. Yeah, and sorry, it didn't mean to talk over the whole thing there, but yeah, incredible. I couldn't even believe that was real time. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
I wonder what the lap record is.
Well,
it was about 3 seconds more, I think Harold said, in the Lucid.
Yes,
just before the.
No, I mean the ever, you know, fastest car ever around Laguna Seca.
I think that's it, isn't it?
If it may well be it, yeah.
I don't know. We'd have to Google that.
Well, the fastest open wheeler at the fastest race lap is 107.
Okay.
And so the fact that a 4-door sedan can do it, in 130, and they reckon they've got time on the tables till.
And that's family sedan. But that's a legal family sedan.
I think Tesla still now holds the record for a production car because you're talking about because you're talking about Formula Ones and just custom.
Was there a mention of the Roadster?
Nope. That's another disappointment. No road. But then, I guess the thing is, if you can buy for 250 grand a family sedan that can beat every motorbike that's in Australia, probably, then you'd almost like cancel your Roadster order and just get this car next year, because Roadster's probably still 2 years away.
The Roadster's a millstone around Tesla's neck.
It is, because of all of these stupid referral awards where they owe, I think it's well over 100 Roadsters, at least, or well over 100.
But then I suppose that they don't need to give them straight away, do they? Because like with the Powerwalls that people won, it took a couple of years for people to actually get those. So They could always, say, well, you'll get one, but in 2 or 3 years' time, I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it was just an insane thing. I mean, with all deference to some of the YouTubers, one YouTuber, Ryan McCaffrey, and he's a nice bloke, and he's got an awesome podcast. And by the way, shout out to Pete for getting a mention.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Well spotted, Richard.
Explain, just tell us shortly the background
As soon as you said
to that.
your name, I was like, oh, wicked.
Tell us the background to that one, Pete.
Well, it's plainly obvious now that there's a reason why we're getting a supercharger in Williams. It's purely because of my telephone call. It happened a day later, so.
Bullshit. Excuse me.
It must have been the phone call. Must have been the straw that broke the camel's back.
Must have been my incessant pestering on Twitter.
So for those of us who haven't listened to that podcast, just tell us how that came about.
So there was a gentleman on podcast number 267 the week before with the name of Andrew, who rang into the podcast asking about the possibilities. So he's got a Cybertruck order. I believe it's the tri-motor from memory. And he lives in Mozambique, Africa. And so his question was, well, how am I going to go owning a electric vehicle where there's no charging infrastructure? And that set me off because
just a sec, just hang on a sec, because what happened was Ryan then said, he'd love someone from the audience to basically ring in and to give this dude from Mozambique some advice. And of course, the irony is that there are 1 or 2 places in the world where there's no EV charging, or fast charging. So yeah, go on, Pete.
Yeah, and so yeah, it just set me off because I thought, well, I know what it's like to be somewhere where there's very little charging infrastructure, and straight away it popped into my head that we've got the unenviable claim to fame, which is the world's most remote supercharger. And so I went on PlugShare and had a look, and the one in Adelaide is the closest one, which is 1,700 miles, I think I worked out for the American audience, or whatever the kilometre equivalent is. Yeah. So I thought I'd ring in and just explain that. So I think he encourages you to keep it under 90 seconds. And if anyone's watched any of my videos, they know.
It was great though. It was well explained. It was interesting. Like it wasn't. It was a good use of whatever the time was.
That was well over 90 seconds. I reckon that was like 2.5 minutes. But it was all good.
Who's counting?
But I've had calls on there before, not for a long time, and mine were always over that. It's like you try, but it's you need to say what you need to say.
I was speaking to the chap who built the supercharger this morning.
Oh, wicked!
In Ethan, he's got a switchboard company, and he said it's 400 amps, 415 volts, and 3-phase. So for the 6 superchargers in Ethan, just north of Bunbury, which is not that far away from us. So, and I think he's built a lot of the other chargers as well. So
you mean from this company? Geograph Electrical.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure what his company's called. I've been there.
Because they were the contractors that installed the supercharger at Eton.
They make the switchboards and.
Oh, cool. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure about the whole sort of thing, but anyway, I was seeing I've got some heavy copper bus bar off him before, and he showed me some of the stuff he's gotten, and it's he gets it from France on a low oxygen or something like that, and he's got some 3,000 amps at a bus bar that he brings in. So I was using it on some supercapacitors that I've got, which put out sort of 600 amps and sort of makes makes lots of big sparks when you think. Just a couple of comments that I sort of just took. He says that the tabless design is actually unique. That's how most capacitors are made like that. They've got sort of you really got to have low inductance in a capacitor, so you don't want 25 turns of layers, because at the end of it all you've got quite a high voltage as you're discharging something rapidly in a particular high voltage capacitor. And I've made lots of them, like 60 centimeters high and some 15 centimeters across. So it's quite big compared to anything just as. But I can't do the edge end connection. But to have a low inductance, you've got to have all those rolls sort of joining up. So I don't know how they actually stick them together. It's not soldered because they just melt the plastic with some conductive stuff. But that's how most capacitors are made, as far as I've seen. And when you don't have it, the place that capacitors fail, the place my capacitors have failed, is right on the inner turns, because that's the greatest distance and the tightest turn, and the consequently probably the greatest resonance, and and that's where they tend to fail. So it's interesting that it's sort of. On the other hand, the battery is a low inductance. Oh, sorry.
No, keep going, Pete. That's all
the battery is a low inductance thing and a high current thing, and so what their requirements are much. Yeah, I mean that's how I used to make capacitors, but that's it's just not the ideal way to do it. So
yeah, well, you can actually see the battery being unrolled there, and you can see the tab spinning around, and it's in the center actually, which is interesting.
And all that inductance of a sort of multiple turns is what is the problem with the high voltage. Sorry, a pulse capacitor, and the pulse capacitors. I mean, I've got some that go up to 200,000 amps. So it's a big discharge all of a sudden. It's a big structural stress as well. So
yes,
not ones that I've made, but yeah. And okay, that's the first thing. Second thing was he mentioned. I think the current batteries are 100. Is it 100 kilowatts? No, 100 kilowatts a kilogram or something? No, it's not.
$100.
No, the extra kilowatt rating per weight. I thought it was. I thought it was.
I think there are around a couple of 200 watt hours per kilo at the moment, something like that.
Because he said there are batteries out there up to 400. Now, it doesn't mean to say they've got the favourable characteristics of charging and cost and easy production and so on. But the ones he was talking about for aircraft are sort of the 400 watt per kilo. I thought that was sort of interesting as well.
Because that's the threshold energy density you need.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can't go any distance, because you've got to sort of land as soon as you take off, because you've run out of energy.
And the other thing was that SpaceX. He said you can't do rockets with electricity. There's a Chinese one that I just saw this morning, YouTube, of they're heating air with 2 microwaves, and so it's a very intense microwave field, and that heats the air, and that's sort of what and makes a plasma, and that's what fires out the back. It's quite different to an iron engine. Which is a very simple thing. I've made them as well. So this is sort of a step above that, and it's quite a good stream. It wasn't that powerful, but it's it's something where you use electricity to generate thrust. And
having said that, Electron, they actually use electric turbo pumps. Well, they're not turbo pumps; they're electric fuel pumps.
Yeah.
For their rocket.
Rutherford engine they use, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, and the batteries drop out as they discharge on launch.
Yeah, that's right. They actually did. Yeah, they do too. They jettison the batteries. That's right.
Yeah, they've done it when they've slowed down to like 1 frame, and you can see the batteries just being jettisoned. That sounds like a great technology to potentially use for an aircraft rather than a rocket. Jet, because obviously once you get out of the atmosphere, that won't work. But if you're in the atmosphere, that could be a fantastic electric propulsion.
What jettison? You mean jettison the batteries halfway?
No, sorry. What Peter's talking about a rocket that could generate thrust by using
Oh, right.
electricity.
Yeah. Sorry. Cool. Cool. Because I guess if you were jettisoning,
might get a bit grumpy about jettison batteries.
you'd probably have to find some cheap land on your flight path.
Have you seen some of the pictures of the Chinese launched rockets? There's like rocket stages landing in people's houses, and there's one guy that's cooking up his dinner in an engine bell nozzle. Fell through his roof 2 years ago. Chinese rocket launches are hilarious.
Oh dear. Yeah. Cool. Cool. So anyone else got any comments or anything?
How many of you had a reservation on the Cybertruck? Because Elon said they ain't coming outside of America.
Ooh.
Not without a redesign.
No, that's a good.
Say that, and he's been misquoted as saying that twice now. What he said was the current model will initially be for the US market, and they probably can't sell it unmodified to Europe. He didn't say it won't come out America. So, in fact, there's a Twitter conversation going on right now to try and get Elon to confirm or deny whether it'll come to Australia. Given that at least 3 of us on this page have got deposits for at least one Cybertruck, so
Australia has Australian design rules, which are pretty prohibitive, and I guess they'll be close to European ones and American ones, I would think. So surely we would have the same.
You can buy a Dodge Ram here, or a F-350,
or a Silverado. I saw one today. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got all the American trucks.
And are you saying you can't buy them in in Europe?
Correct. They're too big.
Listen, guys.
Actually, that's true. You can buy them, but you need to have an HGV license to drive them. So it makes them kind of prohibitive to sell them as a domestic vehicle.
I thought in America those big vehicles had different crush zones. They didn't have to have the same crush zones that cars had, and that's how they could get away with them. And I'm not sure if that happens here or not.
Yeah, that's true here too. Commercial vehicles have different ADRs for safety. So if they bring it to commercial,
and a great note about that, following on from what Ken said, is that the Cybertruck is a commercial vehicle by definition. So that actually does put it into a different category altogether. It is not a passenger vehicle, even though the vast majority of us will be using it as one. By definition, it's a commercial vehicle.
Yeah, there's only one design change that needs to get into Australia. Angus Taylor was talking about it today. It's got to be gas.
Oh my God.
Yes, maybe not. Good one, Rob. Tell you what, it can haul 1.5 tons of coal in its vault, and it can seal it in, so there's no dust emissions. But yes, so James, yes, Stefan.
Yes, can I just ask a question? All these new developments in batteries, does it have any relevance for the existing Model 3s that a lot of us have got? Can these new batteries be at some stage be included in a Model 3, or the batteries exchanged for a newer battery when they run out? Or
yes and no. The short answer, well, technically yes, but there's probably wouldn't be a compelling reason to do that, because the cost, there'd be a changeover cost, and it would be substantial, and there's basically no point. You're better off selling your secondhand car, or selling your car and someone else buying it as a secondhand vehicle, and you're just going on to buy the latest, greatest version that's out there next.
It wouldn't be economic.
We have one of the Tesla owners, presidents in the States. He's actually the president of Vancouver. He's actually exploring getting his battery pack replaced, and he's got a 2017 Model S that he's had the fortunate, I don't know what you call it. He's supercharged his so many times, which we know nothing about because we don't have one very close. that he's actually fed up with the degradation in charging ability. So he's actually running a ruler over replacing his pack. And I think he said that the replacement pack was it 22,000 US, Ken, or 25,000, something of that order.
I heard the conversation about the replacement, but I didn't see the numbers. No.
I think it was something like 22 or 25 US for a 100 kilowatt hour pack, and I presume that was on a exchange basis, because if it wasn't on an outright basis, that would be a screaming bargain. Because what you would do is go to evtv.com or ev.tv, I forget how it goes, and they actually have a module that can convert your S, X, or 3 or Y battery pack into a stationary storage for an inverter. So basically 22,000 US dollars is expensive to just change your pack, because it might have an extra 100 kilometers of range. So Stefan, I think it possibly could technically be done, but you just wouldn't do it. You just go and buy the next version of the car and just sell your current car as a second-hand vehicle.
I have no intention of ever selling my car. I intend to run it for the rest of my life, and I intend to get as many Ks out of it as I can. And when that time comes up, I'd like to be able to know that I can change a pack out, as you can do with Leaf. And Leaf around the world, certainly New Zealand, there are alternative companies offering packs for Leaf. So I would imagine that whether that happens for Tesla or not, but surely there'll be replacement packs available at a reasonable price in the future for these cars.
I think you can get 85 kilowatt hour replacement packs for our Model S 85 kilowatt hour cars.
Richard, back in 2015, we could order one for $12,500 US.
How much?
$12,500 US. I could have ordered one, and if I needed one, I'd get it for that price.
What size was that, Rob?
Sorry?
What size battery was that?
That was an 85 pack, and I just looked at that and thought, well, I'm pretty confident this pack's going to last for a long time, so I'm not bothered. $12,500 US could go into Tesla shares.
Far out, yeah. It's one of those things, because if they're going to change the architecture of the battery of the packs and integrate them into the car, then you'd think that they wouldn't just have them off the shelf. But then, if they're going to continue to make spare packs for older cars,
but
no.
I'd be surprised if they reworked any of the current models.
I agree.
New designs. I reckon the Model 3 and Y will always be 2170, and the S and the X will always be 16450.
Okay, I never thought of that.
Yeah, and I think it was strongly hinted that the new batteries will find their way initially into the Cybertruck and the Semi, and maybe, just maybe, the Plaid S. But
wasn't that graphic though of the chassis that Harold shared? Wasn't that the Model Y?
Yeah, but I mean that's just a comparative drawing. I don't know if you can count that as an engineering drawing of anything, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, I could be completely wrong, and I'd love to be completely wrong, but historically, I mean, us older owners, and I'm not one of the oldest owners, have been wondering for years whether there will be a rework to a 2170 pack for a Model S model. Elon has effectively poured water over that on a couple of occasions and said, no, that's just not going to happen.
You see that graphic, it's really just saying about the technology, whether it's iron-based for Model 3, nickel manganese. Now, interestingly, that's Model...
That's SY.
Oh, sorry, that's Y and S and X.
Yeah.
Right, so
I think you're right about the Germany and having a totally different architecture. It could easily have the new batteries.
No, well, yeah, but James, I think it might mean not so much the new batteries, but the new way they load the batteries into the chassis. So rather than, because models Y and 3 have 4 modules. They're quite long, and there's 2 different sizes, and they're in pairs. Whereas the unified pack model is that all of the cells are in one entire assembly, not split into 4. So, so it's entirely plausible that 2170s in Germany in Model Ys will still use 2170s, but they'll be placed as a monolithic single pack in the structure of the car. Because clearly that doesn't rely on any new battery technology. That's just packaging. And that's really, oh, no, sorry, it might have something to do with the cooling as well. No, it doesn't really, no, it doesn't, sorry. Because the cooling at the moment is done on the sides of the battery. Because they're tabbed electrodes, there's no thermal conductivity to the can. So all the thermal conductivity goes through the layers, which is one of the big disadvantages in increasing the diameter of the batteries, was that you can't extract the heat from the center because it has to go in between the cathode and anode, and also the insulator, or the, whatever you call it, the interlayer, and it's got to radiate outwards. So a Model Y in Germany will still have to have those fins that sort of snake in between the vertical cells. But if it's just one module sort of instead of 4 modules, well, that'll be a saving in itself. And the packaging will be different. There'll be less metal in the actual assembly. And that's with the same cells, the 2170s from either Panasonic from Panasonic at the Gigafactory. At Gigafactory, Nevada. Because I think that's where all the 2170s come from. Unless anyone else knows different. Nope. Yeah, so I think that's right. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you guys noticed that was it, I forget if it was Battery Day or previously, Elon Musk had indicated that there will be, no, he said it today, there will be battery cells produced at Giga Berlin. So they're doing a battery plant there as well. Mm. So it sounds like basically every new Gigafactory is going to have onboard cell production.
I think this makes sense because he'll be talking about moving raw materials as short a distance as possible, any materials, and so you're looking to source them from Europe and build them in Europe.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Is Tesla recovering?
It's up to 410.
411, 411.63 according to NASDAQ. .com.
Only down 3% now. So down 6%, they're only down 3% now.
Do you know, I almost wish I hadn't bought Tesla shares, because now I'm just always checking the app, and I'm like, do you know what? I wouldn't sell them for years, you know.
Exactly.
If I had to.
Because really, it's highly plausible that Tesla aren't going to really hit their straps for another 5-10 years. Mm-hmm. You know.
Well, I think that's part of the big master plan, which is, I mean, everyone knows that Elon's main mission is to get to Mars, and that's going to be incredibly expensive. And I think that's the whole purpose, the grander purpose of Tesla is to fund travel to Mars in 20 and 30 years' time.
Isn't that Starlink's mission though?
Starlink's and Tesla's.
How much is Elon going to make? Is it 100 billion from the share plan, Pete?
I can't remember, but and I'm not even sure when the next threshold is that he needs to meet. But
it's funny. He's skipped over a few now. I don't think he's actually got them all yet. But it's roughly for every 50 or 60 billion dollars of market cap that Tesla's price or capitalization increases by, he gets an extra 1% of shares, and there are 12 tranches up to $650 billion. Sorry, market cap of 650 billion roughly, because when this thing was first proposed, Tesla's market cap was $55 billion. So he's got 12 tranches of, I think, 1% roughly, all the way up to Tesla's market cap of 650 billion. which they're already halfway to.
They're at 400 billion, I think.
Right, well, they're 2/3.
395 billion at the moment. Yeah.
So, and it's funny because a lot of people were outraged that how dare Elon get a potential $100 billion, which is the biggest corporate payout in history. And yet, as shareholders, if you go, well, if I bought Tesla when their market cap was 60 billion and their market cap becomes 650 billion, so that's like a 10 bagger, that Elon Musk gets 10% of the company, it's like, I couldn't care less.
I mean, what's the alternative? You can have Trevor Milton as an alternative if you want.
But he's gone.
Takes his money out in the IPO.
I've just got to apologise. Hey, Trevor, if you're watching this, which is entirely plausible, we apologise.
I don't.
It was Pete. Yes, but he's no longer with Nikola, isn't he? Didn't he leave of his own accord just a couple of days ago?
Supposedly, yeah. Nigel, I think Nigel. Nigel's on top.
Did it go that way?
It's crazy.
Oh, on that note, gentlemen, I've got to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, but lovely talking to you again. I'll see you again.
No worries, Ken. Take care. Good to see you.
See you, Ken.
See you, Ken.
Question going back a few steps. Williams superchargers, is there any indication on how many stalls we would get?
No. So when I was the perpetrator of posting that up, no, absolutely no indication. But I do know it's a permanent site, so it's not a sled.
Oh,
It's a great
really?
Yes.
Far out.
It's permanent. And it's in Q1 next year.
Okay.
And where does that sit in comparison to our Metro superchargers?
We don't have a Metro supercharger.
No, we don't. But it's been promised for 2019 and 2020.
No. It wasn't promised for 2019 and 2020. It was promised for 2017.
Oh, sorry, got it wrong.
And then it was promised for 2018. And then it was promised for 2019. And now it's promised for 2020. And it's the 23rd of September. And the clock's ticking.
Haven't you got a supercharger in Perth yet? Oh, gee, I've been out the loop. I got told April 2016.
Actually.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. You can even unplug it and put it somewhere.
Is that the genuine one? Can you charge your phone with it?
Yes, it's one of those. It's a 3D printed. I forget where I got on the internet. So it's got a USB Type A to a iPhone Lightning doodad, and then that just
because Tesla themselves sell these in their shop.
Do they? Mm. Except you can't buy anything
from Australia.
Yeah, you can't buy anything from their shop in Australia. Yes, so Rob, yes, we don't. I haven't come across Tesla's supercharger in Perth.
Is the one in Lake Grace, the charger in Lake Grace, running now?
Oh yeah. So that's a great topic.
It's not on PlugShare.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is.
So have a little look.
It's marked twice on PlugShare.
Yeah, I just checked on mine and didn't come up.
You've got to click CCS.
My app is
Nigel.
My app is really Nigel. My app is really weird. I think I might need to deinstall it because it's doing some very strange things. When I look at PlugShare on the desktop side, works flawlessly. On my app on my phone, it just doesn't seem to show half the DC charges or most of them, in fact. So
I was just looking at it on PlugShare on the desktop.
Oh right.
You might
Harold,
you might need to tick. I think it's still under construction or in one of those.
No, it's not, Pete. No.
Oh, isn't it?
No.
Okay.
It's definitely as available.
Yesterday was still.
Brilliant.
I looked at it yesterday, and yesterday was still as under construction. Or one of those coming soon. One of those.
No. If you see here, it's fully.
I said.
Oh no, there's a second one. Hang on.
Yeah, see, there's two. Yeah, like Rob said.
Two.
Yeah.
Why has someone put bank wet? What is that about?
See if you can get rid of that one, Harold.
No,
Yeah, we'll
Harold,
have to- yeah.
I've reported that. You've got to. We've all got to go and report that because someone's being cheeky there, and it's not Bank West.
Yeah, cool. Have you sent an email, Rob? You have.
Yeah, I reported that about an hour ago, but I think we need to do it.
Well, don't forget. No. It only takes one. Don't forget, the states are only waking up, so it's still early for them. And I think PlugShare's based in the states. Well, actually, I don't actually know that, but yeah, it'll probably get vanished overnight. So when you reported, did you say that the correct one is next door?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. No worries. Yes, that's very strange that someone did. I wonder who did that.
I know who did that, but I'm not saying.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. No worries. Cool. Well, let's leave it at that. But yeah, so the awesome news is that Lake Grace now is basically Western Australia's most isolated fast DC charger, which is pretty cool. If I just unpull this for a moment. Yeah, it's basically the furthest flung. Now, at least from my place, I'm just about 5k south of Perth. Lake Grace was 315 kilometres away. And in my old Model X, I got there with 4% left on the battery. So anyone with even a standard range Model 3 would be able to get there quite comfortably. And then the great thing is Ravensthorpe is coming. So I'll just put Ravensthorpe up. There's currently destination charger at Ravensthorpe. Now from Lake Grace to Esperance is 374 kilometres. Now that's a bit challenging. You'd have to basically hypermile in many cars to get to Esperance without stopping, but you can actually charge at the Greenhaven Caravan Park at Ravensthorpe. That's an image that doesn't warm the cockles of my heart, but anyway. There's a Tesla charging at a Tesla destination charger. So yeah, you can quite viably go now. Right now you can quite viably go from Perth to Esperance via Lake Grace, and you have a bit of maybe an hour or so at Ravensthorpe just to top up. But Ravensthorpe is coming. The location has been picked as being the IGA, and Eva and Gemtech are just going through the motions of negotiating with Western Power for power upgrades and approvals.
Fantastic.
Is Harold, I put a write-up on Tesla Owners Club today about the trip to Esperance.
Cool.
Right up. Now, one important thing, guys, you've got to remember is the Greenhaven Caravan Park, and I know the history of this. No one in Ravensthorpe, including the Shire, had any interest in electric cars. And the Greenhaven Caravan Park put their hand up. It cost them $1,500 to install those chargers, the Tesla chargers. So, take the effort to go there and spend some money at the Greenhaven Caravan Park.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because they're going to be out of pocket. Once that DC charger goes in, they're out of pocket.
That's sad.
Yeah, I think it's a good practice. Just even if you're buying a $1.50 packet of chips or something, I think it's just a good practice. Or if you like Robin and you're buying a Matchbox car or cleaning out the state.
I've got a road train now.
That's brilliant.
I've got a road train.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Excellent.
That's the only 3 Tesla semis in Perth. You got to be quick to beat Robin.
Yeah.
So what outlets are selling them? Is that still the, was it?
no one's selling them, James, because Rob's bought them all out and they're out of stock. It's all gone.
Basically, Kmart, Target, Coles, Woolworths, even Red Dot have some Tesla.
Red Dot, yeah.
Even Big W. Even Big W's got some.
Big W, yeah.
For $2 each, I saw the other day.
Yeah, so you just got to search through. You got to just search through all the junk, and sometimes these are $10 sometimes. At other places they're $19. So
What does that one hold it up?
That's a.
Okay.
Hang on.
Yep, got it. Yep, beautiful.
Oh, it's just got a roadster in the back as well. Awesome.
It's a Model X one. You do notice it's only dual axle at the back, so I've got to change. I've got to modify these to make them triple axles. and then I'll put Tesla Energy on them, and maybe Angus gas.
Oh dear.
So yeah, I've just been playing with my plug share on my computer, and I had to put the minimum plug score to 0 for Bankwest and the other one to show up, but I still can't get it to show up on the app. What have I got to change there?
Yeah, I still haven't figured it out.
Don't know. My app, it's well, actually, I don't. I'll take that back. I didn't actually look. No, it's there. It's like, whoops, like Grace is definitely there. There it is. Yeah, it's a green one on the. Sorry, the orange one on the right.
It's strange.
So,
Mine doesn't come up.
Nigel, you've got to open your screen up and in and out a couple of times and let it sit, let it settle.
Do you see a green pin instead?
I do, yeah.
I've got one green pin, that's all.
Zoom right in, like ridiculously in.
And on my app, I can't see the Bankwest one. I can only see the one.
Yeah, that's what happens to me as well.
So again, Pete, you can only see Bankwest.
No, I can't see Bankwest. I can only see the one.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, see, that's what I get as well. Yeah, I get the same thing. I mean, obviously, the Bankwest one will be leaving probably by tomorrow morning. Oh, a bit hard to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, can't.
It's probably got facial recognition happening. Yeah, you've got, because you got one of the advanced background thingies. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. Let me see if I can get rid of that.
Well, then we'll see what's behind you, and that could be embarrassing.
It's what's in front of the camera that's embarrassing. Don't worry about it.
In the meantime, I'll just carefully move my green screen so that you can't see this rubbish here. There we go.
If I just
cool.
behind me. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, go on, Pete.
Yeah, just behind me is the world's oldest functioning battery. So 1 million mile battery, nothing compared to this. This is the Oxford battery. It's functioning for 175 years. 175 years. It's got plates of I think it's zinc and copper, and I think the separating thing is paper, I think, and so there's this pile of sort of, might generate 1,000 volts each. So they sort of join up the top there and come down. And at the bottom, there's a sort of a clapper bell, or maybe it's the top. There's a sort of clapper bell which swings one side to the other, just electrostatically. And it just draws an incredible, it's still clapping, but it's inaudible now, but there is actually still movement there. And it's a sort of set up, I think they might have even vacuumed it, put it under vacuum, and But yeah, Oxford University, and that's 175 years old. So
is it a rechargeable battery, or is it just chemical? Is it just
no? It's just an oldest, the zinc and copper. It's what you make a lemon battery into a, lemon into the battery. You put a zinc in you put a galvanized nail in and a little copper plate, and that's gives you 0.7 volts or something on it, whatever it is.
So it's been chemically reacting in one direction, like it's not being recharged.
It's just paper. So the residual humidity in the paper, it's all sealed with wax. So no one's going to open it up, but that's what's understood, that it's paper as an electrolyte, just residual humidity is the electrolyte. And because there's just so many of them, it's how many volts it is, enough to have enough static charge to swing them back and forth.
Right. So it's producing nanoamps of.
Oh, yeah, less probably.
Probably less. Yeah.
Apparently, it's still functioning. Just you look up Oxford battery, and you'll get a sort of interesting YouTube. Anyway, I just thought in terms of battery longevity, that's just that's the one that kills them all. Yeah.
That's almost as exciting as that.
Watching grass grow. Yeah.
No. Grass grows really quickly. Those bitumen drops where
I think that's the world's longest experiment. And I think it actually dropped its ninth drop just recently or something like that. Yeah.
And I think several times they've missed it. They've had webcams on and there was a power outage or something and they missed it. And there's like a whole lot of Greek tragedies around missing the actual drop.
But the pitch drop is, I think it's an Australian one, isn't it?
Yes. I think it's in Queensland or something, one of the universities.
Well, it's oldest functioning experiment. So.
Yes, to work out the viscosity of. Well, it's to work out.
I shall be. It's getting a bit late for me, so.
Yeah, no, Stefan,
and looking forward to next week.
And good to see you. Take care.
See you, Stefan. To be honest, it's getting too late for me as well. I've got very early starts here.
Yeah. No worries, Richard.
Pleasure. See you guys next week.
Take care. Cheers.
See you, Richard.
Well, I was up watching the battery day, so I'll probably turn in as well. So it's sort of a long day.
I had a nano nap just to try and recover a bit before going to work.
I didn't get the luxury of that.
I only managed to get 4 hours sleep last night. I didn't get home till a little bit after 11. And didn't get to sleep till about 12:30 and was up at 4 o'clock.
When did you leave, Pete? Lake Grace?
I can't remember. It would have been, but I remember looking at the last charge, and I think I stopped charging at about 5:15. But then one of the locals wanted to go for a drive, so I took him for a drive, and then I spent a bit too much power. So I had to charge again.
But then you had to charge again, didn't you? Or you had to go slow?
No, I charged again. But yeah, it cuts you out at 95%. So.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't know about you, which is good advice for anyone that's got insomnia and who hasn't yet fallen asleep. Hey, Damon. Thanks for watching. I don't know if you noticed, Pete, that I've got a Model X. I had to do like 95 k's an hour and 100 k's an hour in places to basically reach Lake Grace with 4% left. And my car was warning me to slow down and all that sort of stuff. But on the way home, because it was later in the late afternoon and transitioning to evening, the road had gotten cold. And my performance my range was completely different. So I just belted out 110 k's the whole way and made it with something like 7% or 6% battery.
Harold, that's really interesting. I had the exact opposite experience of that. Because I think I told you on the way down to Lake Grace, I was doing the speed limit pretty much everywhere. And my efficiency was always around a little bit under 170 watt hours per kilometer. But on the way home, because by the time so when I got there, it was about 20 degrees. But when I started going home, it was closer to 10 degrees and probably heading into the wind as well. But yeah, I was struggling. You know, I couldn't get my efficiency below 180. I had no chance.
And you're in a
So
3.
I was close to 190 at one stage.
You're in a 3.
Yeah, it's 3 performance.
Oh, but Pete, don't forget to say that you're a P minus, because it makes a big difference.
Yeah, yeah, with 18-inch wheels, yeah, and aero wheels. Yeah.
So that's weird. So you actually had worse on the way back.
Yeah.
Did you have your aircon on?
No, I didn't have. Everything was the same inside the cabin.
Yeah, yeah. Because it got a bit cold. Because I noticed it was like 12 degrees or something. I got home at 20 past 8, and like in the hills, or on the, you know, like approaching the hills, it was quite cold. It was about 14 degrees, 12 degrees. But I didn't have an aircon on, because the aircon, the heater will chew your juice.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, I didn't. I purposely left the heater off.
Yep.
And yeah, it was 10 degrees as I was coming into Perth.
So Harold, are your tyres low profile, Harold?
No, they're 20-inch. The Model X is standard 20-inch tyres.
Okay, so there's no difference.
They're not the factory ones. They're a slightly harder compound. I think they have a tread wear of 480, or tread wear index of 480, and I pump them hard. So I pump my tyres to the maximum inflate limit of the tyre, cold inflate, which obviously I'm not recommending anyone does that, but that's just what I do.
How high is that?
That's 50 psi. So the max inflate on the tyre wall says 50 psi, and that's cold.
Do you find the inside of your tyres wears out a bit more?
No. So which side? Say that again, Pete.
Do you find, is it the inside or the outside that wears out more?
No, in my car, the inside chews out, but that's because of the air suspension and the geometry. It's on the rears that it happens the worst. And that's just a idiosyncrasy of air suspension cars. And initially, when I first owned my car, I used to have automatic lowering, because you could lower the air suspension automatically when you go faster, so like freeway speeds, and that would get you a greater efficiency. But the problem is, as the suspension goes down, the tires actually bow outwards like that. So then it cuts the inside of the tire, and when you're on very high, it actually just slightly bows out like that. It's a bit like the old Beetles. And I think on my car, it's sort of like parallel at about high, but high looks a bit weird, and I just drive my car on normal. So anyway, it's just, unfortunately, that's a Tesla idiosyncrasy. And there's, I think Unplugged Performance were offering, I don't know if it's Camber. What's the kit, Rob? Is it Camber that's the...
Yes, that's Camber.
Yeah.
That's Camber.
But then apparently people have reported that they've had theirs break, like that some linkage, there's like an adjusting linkage that they've retrofitted, and it's failed, you know, some months later. So it's still a bit of an unresolved issue, but yeah, so yeah, it's just strange. I found the opposite and normally it is the case when you're driving at night. It's the fact that the actual tarmac is colder, so there's less rolling resistance, even though your tires are up to temperature because they're still being flexed. But you do get less rolling resistance at nighttime, even though obviously the air is denser that you're pushing through because it's colder, slightly denser. But I think the gains. See, our biggest issue driving around WA is our chip seal roads out of Perth. So once you hit chip seal, all you hear is that noise, and that noise is just wasted energy, you know, and that's a real killer. I don't know if you noticed, Pete, but there were sections of the road to Lake Grace where it was really old road, and all the stones had basically sunk into the tar, and it was quite smooth, especially going towards Lake Grace. I think on the way back it wasn't as smooth, like it was a bit different. And that makes a huge difference.
What do you think would have the biggest effect on your range? Do you think, because obviously if it's 10 degrees versus 20 degrees, all else remaining equal, it will have an effect on your battery because your battery likes to be closer to 20 degrees rather than 10 degrees.
No, because I think as you're driving along, your car automatically adjusts the coolant flow. So
the BMS does it all.
Yes, so the cold air is not an issue.
Okay.
If it's nighttime, of course, you don't have the heat. Like for instance, whether it's a 20-degree day or a 40-degree day, in daylight on a sunny day, it probably makes very little difference for the road because it's still probably at, I don't know, 50, 60, I don't know what a road gets to, 50 degrees, 60 degrees from
Absolutely.
the sun.
50 degrees up north.
Yeah. Whereas the air temperature doesn't really affect the temperature of the road because that's mainly subject to the infrared heating of the sun. So I think the biggest one is the road temperature on those chippy roads,
right?
More than the air temperature, I think. Because the air temperature is a bit variable because when it's hot, it's thinner than when it's cold and a bit denser. But I think the chip seal roads have such a great impact that that's the predominant variable, I guess. Yeah.
You know, speaking of chip seal roads, you know how they put the new road towards the Brand Highway past Ellenbrook, and the main roads guy was on ABC radio probably 4 months ago, and people had complained about flying rocks and broken windscreens, and he said, "Oh look, it'll settle down in a couple of months. It'll all be good." And of course, it hasn't. It's just as bad. And ABC on Monday said, "Look, ring in if you've had any rock damage to your car." And they just had hundreds of people ringing in from the day before with broken windscreens. It hasn't settled down at all.
Apparently, there's a fairly narrow window of applying the actual top seal or the blue metal stones onto the tar, that if that's mistimed or the temperatures aren't right, they don't actually bond and they'll be sort of loose or not quite properly bonded sort of forever. So it never gets better. I think the main roads guy was probably presuming that there must be a certain percentage of loose stones that will eventually get sort of swept off or whatever. But I don't know if you guys remember the Kwinana Freeway south of South Street, really, before they had the bridges, there was a failure in the actual tarmac itself, like it was all eroding and they had to get it all redone. So yeah, it's really technical when it comes to doing bitumen and chip seals, because if you're unlucky or don't do it right, it just ends in disaster.
It is, and the main roads problem is they've got to spend $78 million re-asphalting the top, making it smoother, or they just keep paying for people's windscreens. Because you make a claim for the windscreen, which, you know, I know what the average cost would probably be $400 or $500 a car, average.
Imagine the cost of my windscreen, which is the world's biggest domestic car windscreen. Like that's got to be a K or something. I don't know how much it is, if Tesla even have it in stock.
That's right.
It would be more than that, you'd probably find.
Yeah, entirely possible. Yeah. I haven't actually been on that stretch. What's it like, Rob? It's awesome to get to Musha, isn't it?
Apparently, no. Apparently, it's a really good shortcut, but you got to avoid it now. You're going to get a cracked windscreen if you go on it. And people have said, look, you only need a car or caravan to pass you the other way, or a truck, and you're going to get hit. If it doesn't hit your windscreen, you're going to get damaged paint.
Yeah.
So it's one to be avoided until they fix it.
Thankfully, we've got aluminium doors, front skins, so it'll never corrode.
Yeah, just chip. Yeah.
Cool.
Now, actually, speaking of plug share, go on to the Mandra DC charger and tell me who runs that charger.
ChargeFox. which now has a score of 1 because yeah, go on, Rob.
Yeah, so it says there ChargeFox. I rung ChargeFox on Sunday, and they couldn't get it to work for me. But I've heard that NextCharge run it.
I don't know. It doesn't. It's not what PlugShare says. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah. Is there any reason why that the ChargeFox would think they still are running that charger, but they couldn't get it work? The actual charger works. The green lights were on.
Yeah, it might have dropped off the modem, Rob. So it might not. In other words, they may not be in control of it because they don't have visibility of it. Like it's offline, even though the lights are on. You know, the lights might be on, but no one's home. Is it on their app?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but is it actively on their app? No, it's not. See, it says no, it's not. It's offline. That's what's wrong with it. So what it's showing is there's only if I can get it to, there's only type 1, which is the circuit control, just the basic type 1 thing on there. So it's offline. That's
So
what's wrong with it.
how is Joseph managing to use it?
Because if it goes offline, they can set it so that it basically has free charging. So they can decide whether, if it's offline, it can either decide to just stop working, or it can decide to go into free mode.
It says that he tried it and it was charging stopped after 1 minute.
Yes, and that's no surprise because we're actually, as a club, we're actually working on the solution to the RAC highway. And that's exactly what my car does, is it will charge up. Oh, I think I've seen it at about 35 kilowatts for a few seconds and then it clicks off. And it's basically due to electrical interference on the control pilot line that the car's getting worried about, and then it decides to disconnect. So, so yeah, that's Joseph's experience is entirely consistent with what those stations are doing. But the good news is that we're working on it, and hopefully we'll have a solution in the next very short time.
Yeah, I've had no luck. I tried just after Christmas on the Dunsborough charger, and I tried about 6 or 7 times, and sometimes it would go as long as a minute, roughly, and then it would drop out. And I rang, I think it was Patrick Finnegan that answered the phone.
Yep.
And yeah, it was on the phone with him numerous times. He tried to restart it, tried everything, just it wouldn't work.
Yep. Well, now the club's actually got the charger in good hands, and we're working on that solution. So as soon as we've got a proper solution that we've tested, then we can roll it out to all the chargers. And then ultimately the goal is to get every single one of those online for all Teslas, which will be great because, you know, as we can see on the map, there are lots of them. Oops. Once we get rid of the green ones.
Joseph had Mandra working on the 13th of September.
Yes, but the thing is, Rob, they're all, well, they're not anecdotes. Well, they sort of are. Just because one charger works for a short period of time, or, you know, the fundamental reason why they're not working is because of electrical noise being induced on the control pilot. Because don't forget, all of these RAC chargers work perfectly well with all the other cars, all the other car manufacturers, except for Tesla. But then Tesla works perfectly well on tritium chargers. So it's not Tesla's fault. It's just that they're probably adhering more strictly to the CCS standard, which, you know, I guess you could criticize them for doing that, in the sense that, you know, if the car's charging okay, then why get upset about a bit of noise? But then on the other hand, a bit of noise could mean that the plug isn't mated properly, or there's some fault going on, and Tesla's just being appropriately cautious. It's just that, unfortunately, because these RAC electric highway units are old, it's causing an issue. So I guess, you know, it's easy to blame both sides. It's easy to blame the manufacturer of the chargers, and it's also just as easy to blame Tesla, because you could sort of say to Tesla, well, if you just did a software update, you could just make all of these things sort of magically work. But that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So what we're working on now, and we've had a bit of a pause, but now we're back into working on it, literally as of today. So hopefully a solution will come about in the next few days. I don't know if it'll be in time for the school holidays, or at least the start of the school holidays, but we're working, TOC was working really hard to get that sorted. So,
Bjorn's recent video on YouTube, where he noticed that with the 150 kilowatt chargers anyway, when he plugged it in, he had to push it and hold it while it was negotiating, because sometimes it kept cutting out.
Yeah, it's, in this case, it's the weight. It's the weight of the cable, which is very heavy, and then basically it's pulling down on the entire CCS arrangement, which is actually taller than the ones the S's and X's have. And the control pilot pins are actually at the top. I don't have a plug handy, but basically the control on a Type 2, oh, actually, sorry, it's on the, here we go, we can show it. I will just share this screen. It'll be a bit small, but if you look down lower left, the bottom two are the DC pins, and the next two rows are the AC pins, and then the top two pins are the control pilot and presence pilot. So they're at the top, and actually the control pilot is the shortest pin. So, and that's done by design, because if you somehow start pulling the connector out of the car, it's literally, they have short pins, so that the first pin that breaks contact is the control pilot, and then the car must stop drawing power within a very short time frame, like it's much less than a second. So then the idea is that, and also the EVSE, the charger, also realizes that that contact has been lost and will also stop supplying power. So that way you don't get excessive arc or any arcing when you rupture the contact. So I think what Bjorn was seeing was, with the weight, obviously it was slowly pulling it out, and once you lost contact with the control pilot, it would stop working. So I think, I don't know, I haven't seen Bjorn's video, but I've heard of people putting like bins, or you know, a short broom or whatever, sort of propping up the cable to take the weight off the.
I was just wondering, because these RAC chargers are 5 years old, so I was just wondering if they were wearing a bit, or.
No. They're just an old design. Their main power supply, the switch mode power supply, runs at 10 kilohertz, and the control pilot signal is 1 kilohertz, which is only a 10-to-1 ratio. So any noise that's developed by the switching circuit to produce the DC voltage can be induced on the control pilot line, and that's what's causing the problem. So all that needs to be done is for that noise to be suppressed, and then basically the problem's solved. So it's not the age of the units per se, It's just that they are an older design. So, you know, the newer units are a more advanced design that aren't subject to those sort of issues. So, yeah, the great thing about the ROC highway was it was actually the world's first bona fide electric highway. And I guess in one sense, we benefited from being, well, the penalty we paid to being early adopters was we have to contend with older technology. So if we had waited a little bit, we probably would have had more modern equipment. But then that's a chicken and egg, you know, argument. Which means that when we get a Perth supercharger, it might even be a V3 because we've waited so long that maybe even V3s will be a bit old and they'll give us one of those and they'll be like V4s somewhere else. So I don't know. Speaking of which, did you see the aerial footage, one of Jason Yang's Shanghai Gigafactory drone videos actually showed Tesla building out a 64 stall V3 supercharger setup.
The 56, isn't it?
No, 64. No. The 56 peak was that's in the US.
Fireball. Is it Fireball?
Firebar or something. Firebar, I think it is. Yeah. No. This one is in Shanghai and it's 64 stalls, and they're all V3s. Which, if you think about it, that's
it's the 3,000 amp bus bar that you you have lots of.
That's 16 megawatts of delivered power. That's not input
16
power.
or only 8?
Sorry, say again.
Would it be 16 or only 8 because they're shared?
No, they're not shared. That's the whole point with version 3. Is version 3 you have one box, one DC supply, which is 1 megawatt, and that splits to 4 stalls, but it splits permanently. So each stall gets a permanent 250 kilowatts, and it's not shared.
That's good. So you don't have to worry about parking next to someone.
Nope, absolutely not. No. So so that's how when I saw the footage, I posted it up because you could see that they were version 3 stalls, and there were 2 lines of 16 in one under one canopy, and they've actually got the identical one alongside. So it's clearly a 64 stall version 3 supercharger setup, and that's in addition to what they've already got on the other side of the factory, which is, I can't remember, 20 or so stalls or something.
So is this just to charge cars before delivery?
It could be. Yeah, I don't really know, James. I guess that's plausible. Yeah, that's probably fairly plausible. And it's also a thing for Shanghai because, you know, in China there's lots and lots of Model 3s. So it's a little bit like, you know, the Bay Area and LA in California. They've got so many supercharger sites, it's just not funny. You know, it literally is, if I bring the map up, there's a ludicrous number of stalls and of stations, and many of them have got dozens of stalls. It is coming up. Oh, and by the way, for the Williams supercharger, there's no need to expect they'll put it on the map anytime soon. They usually update maps at the end of the year. So, you know, obviously we'll take off service.
Yeah,
You know,
so he was looking to.
eastern states have got a fairly good smattering of superchargers, but if we go the same scale,
What do you want to get? Sandwich and.
Whatever you've got, 2 sandwiches and some orange juice.
and that's not all of them, because if you zoom in, like just in the Bay Area,
Phenomenal, isn't it?
and like Daly City is about 50. They're urban superchargers. Oh, 40, sorry. 40. And that's just at a shopping centre. You know, and
A lot of these people don't have garages, do they? They have on-street parking.
that's right. Yes, indeed. Indeed. And there's one that's, I don't know if I can see the one that they're doing in between LA, the fire bar. It might not be mentioned. Yeah, it is there. Fire bar. And that's 56 stalls of version 3. But yeah, we just can't fathom. And speaking of being a late to the party, of course, Canada has got an awesome, on their Trans-Canadian Highway, all of these stations, most of them are V3.
And they've only been there for what it seems like only maybe a year, almost a year and a half now.
Yeah, actually about a year. Yeah, that's about right, James. Yeah, about a year. And they're all 250 kilowatts V3s.
Those ones through Canada, those superchargers are critical. Because
Yes.
when the USA goes to civil war next year,
Yeah,
and
later this year.
it gets split down the middle, New York and California will have to connect up via that road.
Where's Perth? Is it one of these stations? Is Perth?
Near Toronto.
Toronto.
It's 100 miles from Toronto.
Excuse my Canadian ignorance, but where's Toronto? Oh, there it is. There's Toronto. Did you say 100 miles? It's in the US, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's in the US?
No, it's in Canada, because I remember reading a story about a Tesla limousine that used to do that road.
Yeah, right. Anyway,
So
we'll go to the other Perth, because that's easy to find. Because of course there's a Perth in Scotland, which apparently our Perth was named after.
Up, yeah, there.
No, sorry, that one.
Yeah.
And that's awesome, because it's got 12 superchargers at 150 watts. Awesome.
If they put one in Perth, Tasmania, I'll be annoyed.
Oh dear. Poor old Perth, WA. What's wrong with us? Actually, you know what's wrong with us? I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with us. Once I find Australia again. This is what's wrong with us. Oh, hang on. It's not showing it on the... Oh, yes. Hang on. Do you see the end of the Explorer text here?
This is Washington.
Perth, Washington supercharger. Because what are our initials? WA. What are the initials of a certain state in the United States? WA. So poor old Tesla thinks that Perth is in Washington. So perhaps what they're saying is, we don't need to install one because Washington state in the US has got plenty of superchargers and it's low priority. Or maybe the installer's gone, I don't know where Perth is in Washington. So we never got round to it.
I hope there's not a Williams in Washington state.
Because, yeah, Washington state's got a few. But anyway, enough of that banter. It will come. They've only promised it since 2017. So,
So Harold, what makes you guys so confident knowing the delays with the CBD charger is because we have a time frame for Williams. Is
Yes.
that what?
Yeah. So I basically spoke with the people at Williams at the Woolshed. So it's definitely confirmed that there is a supercharger being installed there, and it will be early next year.
That's a Tesla supercharger.
Absolutely, yes. Oh, and interestingly enough, sorry, James. Interestingly enough, I also got a snippet that they're building a new petrol station at Williams, and that there will be car charging there, which is super interesting.
I can tell you about that one because it's a mate of mine who's doing it.
Awesome.
It's a Shell service station, and I think he said 6 to 8 months it'll be done. And they're doing it because, well, no, there's there, and there's also one. They're also doing one around Mandurah or somewhere like that. I don't know if a Tesla supercharger would make any difference to their plans. I don't suppose it would because they're going to be appealing to everyone.
Yes.
Yep. So, but my sources aren't always good because it's the same group of guys who've also told me that, or a different person, but he did the lease agreement, helped negotiate a lease agreement with Tesla in Osborne Park about 12 months ago on Scarborough Beach Road. And that was where they expected to have a showroom slash, workshop. And there's no sign of that.
No, that's actually dead right, James. What actually happened, what I heard, is that they were negotiating with. It's a building that used to be a car dealership or car whatever.
Yep.
Repair place. It got rezoned as a car wash or whatever.
Yep.
And then rezoned back, and there was some issue. It was going to happen, and then I think the landlord pulled out, or Tesla pulled out, or whatever. This one is more in the category of rumor, although it's from a fairly interesting source. And that was, the hot rumor is that Tesla might be moving into the Green & Co building in Leederville.
Okay.
In Oxford Street, Leederville.
Well, that makes a lot of sense for location, close to freeway, close to the city.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot more. I put it this way: Williams is absolutely confirmed. Green & Co is less so. It's more.
But it makes more sense than the Northbridge idea. It makes more sense than the Osborne Park idea.
Yeah. Don't get fooled by the Northbridge. If you look on the map, it looks like it's in Northbridge.
Yeah, Newcastle Street or something.
Yeah, but and I must admit, I ran a microscope over that one until I realised that it's just Google placing the pin. It's sort of where it notionally puts the pin.
Notionally Perth, yeah.
Yeah, so it's absolutely not going to be in Northbridge. That's just the way the pin fell.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's certainly not going to be there. Well, sorry, that was the supercharger.
Scarborough Beach Road makes some sense because it's around other car dealers. B, it's very close to the freeway. It's easy to get in and out, not far from the city. But Leederville makes much more sense because it's right in the city.
Oh, look, it's an awesome cappuccino strip. It's got restaurants and all that sort of stuff. One of the challenges there would be zoning. So they'd have to get the building rezoned. And the problem is, to the council, they would treat it as a mechanic's place.
Yeah, well,
vehicle servicing with toxic fluids, oil, waste oil, all that stuff.
The friend who was dealing with negotiation on Scarborough Beach Road was, I don't know if you need to use the argument, but he's prepared to use the argument that they're really white goods, not motor vehicles, because it doesn't have those dangerous fluids.
I thought you were going to have a reference to the Poverty Pearl white cars that would be going there, because they're certainly white goods. But you're right. But then one of the arguments I heard against that was the problem is if you set the precedence of it being a vehicle repair place or servicing place, then if Tesla moved out, then possibly the landlord could then move someone in like BMW or whoever. So the council has to be careful with their approval. And maybe it means that they have to put shackles on it to say, this is only for electric vehicles only or whatever, because, you know, councils don't want to set a precedent that then someone uses that as a thin edge of a wedge to get some other undesirable thing happening. And, you know, just go to the stat to get approved.
Could it be that they say, well, this is going to be a showroom / charging spot and workshop will be elsewhere?
No, it's for the service centre.
Yeah.
Because basically Tesla are rapidly outgrowing the Netherlands.
Well, I don't think Green & Co is quite big enough either.
It's a lot bigger. Yeah. It's 2 stories. It's actually not a bad thing because you can have the showroom in the front. They have to punch a hole in the back of the building because there's no rear access. Although the access is to the car park at the back. You go on, Pete.
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, it's a really good setup, isn't it? Because you've got all that parking down the back, and you've got access from both ends.
Yes.
So you could have the service centre down the back and the showroom on the cafe strip.
Oxford Street.
Down.
Oh yes, right here. Whoops. Okay. We'll get our little swingy man. We go to the back.
I suppose it's really big, isn't it?
So this is actually the back of it. So that's a tiny roller door. So they'd have to basically put a lintel up here and then punch through.
That's dead easy.
For car access. And then from the front, oops. Oh, hang on a sec, sorry about this.
Nice graffiti.
Yes.
That's the front, that green, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so 2 stories going at the back.
Because it's funny because there is an image on Google that had Green & Co. and of course someone graffitied a CK at the end of it.
It kept on going on, up and off, and the owner just left it there.
Yeah. That's right. So that's the hot rumor. I mean, look, it's an awesome location. It's probably value-wise for Tesla, it'll be cheap rent compared to other places like Claremont and whatever. But it's still got that sort of cappuccino strip type sort of vibe to it. And yeah, the access is great. Sorry, if I can get, this computer's playing up at the moment. It's not really, there we go. So you got the big car park. You've also got the toilet blocks there. What I was thinking of is you could get a double banger. You could get the, see, and the upper story is awesome for offices and stuff and storage and whatever. So it's a pretty big building. But because you've got the toilet blocks and IGA and all that sort of stuff, you could also have a supercharger set up here as well. So you get a 2-for-1.
Absolutely.
So that if Green & Co becomes the service centre, then I would pick this car park or some bays in this car park as a hot tip for a Perth supercharger.
Vincent is very keen on this sort of thing. Vincent actually had chargers in their car parks a long time ago on Beaufort Street, although they've pulled them out now.
Yes, yes. So that's a slightly more speculative. And like I said, I think they've got issues with getting rezoning for use. But Tesla is a unique case. So yeah,
I think if they throw a cafe around the cars in the front, they would get away with it. A bit like in Melbourne, where you've got the motorcycle shops or the car shops with cafes in them on those sort of roads.
That's almost a bit like the 7-Elevens where 7-Elevens, the petrol stations, where they actually get the approval on the shop, and then they say, as an adjunct, oh, by the way, we also sell fuel. So it's almost the opposite, isn't it? So you put the cafe to block the view of the cars or whatever. But then,
sit around the cars. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the thing is, you don't need much space. You need, even Chadstone is pretty small, and that's got room. Well, it used to have room for a sled and a Model S and X. Well, now it's got a Model 3, so maybe the sled's now gone, and there's just an S3 and an X. So you don't need much space for that.
When you say sled, do you mean just the chassis?
Oh yes, yeah. At the retail outlets, they would have the skateboard. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, when I say sled, yeah, that's right. It's a skateboard. Sorry, not the sled. But yeah, there you go. So that's so Williams is definite, and the service centre is a little bit more speculative. But Tesla are seriously looking at doing a service centre away from Nedlands. So that's great.
Still, yeah. Good.
And the fact that I've also got Williams, the next logical place would be Kojonup, obviously, because that's the ideally place to get to Albany. But unfortunately, we've got no sniff of that.
Arthur River's halfway, so I suppose Williams isn't that much before. So I think you'd imagine Williams to Albany would be fine, wouldn't it?
Oh, it's good. It's perfectly okay, but it's not fantastic. The issue with Arthur River is there's no power there. They've only got split phase rural power.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, even though ironically, I remember driving inland towards Arthur River, and it's only about 5 k's away. There's huge high tension cables, but it just doesn't go to Arthur River. But that would be pretty expensive to.
Kojonup might be one. What about Mount Barker? Because that's kind of the turn off to Denmark, and that's probably not a bad intersection in some ways. The end of the Stirling Ranges. Was it too close to Albany?
Hang on a sec. So Mount Barker.
It's only an hour. It's only.
Excuse my ignorance. Which way is it?
It's that where that brown spot is. There's Albany. There's 2 green ones, and there's a brown one.
Mount Barker. Yeah, no, that's too close to Albany, basically. Well, unless. Yeah, I think it's too close to Albany. And to be honest, you see, Arthur River would have been ideal because it's literally splits the difference. But if they're going to have a supercharger at Williams, then it makes perfect sense to have one at Kojonup.
And Kojonup's a good spot. It's got lots happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you'd have one at Albany, of course. And then you'd have to have one. Well, by that logic, you have to have one at Jerramungup, one at Ravensthorpe, and one at Esperance.
And one at Walpole.
Go
around past Denmark.
Yes, or Manjimup. Oh no, sorry, Albany. Yeah, maybe Walpole.
I think there's more traffic, to be quite honest, between Albany and Margaret River than there would be to Esperance. I think it's fantastic to get to Esperance, but I think there's also demand, and probably a bigger demand, along the southern coast.
Yeah. I forget what we'd actually sent a proposal to Tesla suggesting locations, and I think we might have suggested Manjimup. I can't remember now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because Manjimup makes a bit of sense as well.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, But I guess the point is the fact that Tesla is literally going to be installing a supercharger, well, at least that we know of, in Williams. I mean, what it might be is that they may be installing, and that's one that's not even a pin on a map.
You only know that because you spoke to the owner, so there could easily be others.
Yeah, so that's from the horse's mouth, and the owner knows what he's talking about.
He's got both his destination charges up again, has he?
Yes. No, I think there's Rob. Is there? Are you on, Rob?
No, there's one HPWC and one three-phase 16 amp.
That's what I thought. Because I think originally there were two HPWCs, but now there's a HPWC and a three-phase outlet.
Right. But he still owns the two. He's told me a while ago he has one in the shed just lying there, not reinstalled.
Yeah. Cool. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So in 3 or 4 months he's going to get a shiny. Oh, sorry. 4 or 6 months he's going to get a shiny supercharger in the car park.
So we go through there to get down to Wage, and last time a partner went down, there was actually another Tesla on the destination charger in Williams, so carried on.
Yes.
In news.
Is that a Type 2 charger in Williams?
It's a destination charger, so it's Type 2, yes.
Now, what's going to be put in?
Supercharger.
A supercharger, Type 2 or version 2?
It'll be... Oh, that's a good question.
I'm assuming it will be a 150 kilowatt charger.
Probably. Well, you just don't know, because I think Tesla are building their own version 3 superchargers.
Yeah, they're 250 watts.
Yep. But they come as a 1 megawatt set. So, and that could be a problem because Tesla want to have redundancy. So for instance, Eaton has 6 stalls and 3 DC supplies because they're in pairs. So the minimum that Tesla would generally install is a 4-stall version 2 supercharger where you have 2 power units and then 2 pairs each. If they put a version 3 supercharger, they'd have to actually have 8 stalls and 2 power outlets to get version 3. And that they may think that's a bit excessive. Although maybe what they could do is do 4 stalls of V3 and 2 stalls of V2, because they always want to have redundancy. If one system fails, they want to make sure that their station is still up.
As opposed to that network in the States last weekend that closed down 500 miles of charging. Did you read about that?
Electrify America.
Electrify America, yeah.
Oh, really?
They changed every single charger on the road. They closed for a long weekend.
That was the East Coast from New York down to Miami, or almost down that way. They locked the whole system, didn't they? Ridiculous.
On a long weekend, yeah.
On a long weekend.
Yeah, well, what can I say? Aren't they also the dearest? Like, I think they're charging a fairly outrageous, it's $1.50 US a kilowatt hour or something. It's really expensive.
Really? Yeah.
Unless you subscribe to them.
Ah, right. And that was part of VW's billions of dollars of penalty, wasn't it? I think they're funding.
They certainly had to pay some.
Yeah.
Substantial sum.
I think they're favouring some manufacturers, aren't they? Is that there, or is that in Europe? Where if you are driving maybe it's a Kona and a Mustang and something else, you get cheap power. But if you anything else, you pay through the nose.
Yeah, I think so. Although the way they're pricing it, I think everyone pays through the nose on Electrify America, and it's almost like the thing is, none of the legacy car makers have actually got their hearts in it. So they're just waving flags and saying, well, we're just going to charge you a lot of money for it, and we're going to milk you dry if you're silly enough to use us or desperate enough. Yeah, don't know. but yeah, so with the Williams thing, we don't know what's happening to Kojonup, if there is, what's happening to Perth, you know, what's happening further north, you know, maybe to Geraldton or to Kalgoorlie, because, you know, those are the largest 4 or 5 cities in WA. But I guess we'll just have to watch this space.
Well, they've made it clear that they won't do anything with the Nullarbor for a long time, and you kind of makes you wonder why would they rush to do something like Kalgoorlie, because it's, you know, I don't know.
I think Kalgoorlie is the 6th largest city,
Okay.
and actually Kalgoorlie is not too hard because you could get away with Merredin and Southern Cross.
Yeah.
So that's only 2 places.
Yeah.
And if you used supercharger stalls, which is just one DC supply and two stalls on a forkliftable sled, so it can be sort of temporarily installed, a little bit like Horsham, which is in South Australia. And this
they've
thing,
got the 2 there, haven't they? No Horsham.
they've got a sled
behind the supermarket.
Yes. Keith Horsham. So
that's it.
It's just a forkliftable temporary installation, and you just hook it up to power. I think one of these photos shows it better. Yeah, it's basically adjacent to the loading dock at the back of Target, and that's completely temporary. And yet that was installed. I think it was 2017.
You might see my car in there.
Yeah, yours will be much later. There you go, 2017. The irony is there's quite a few West Australian cars.
So there's those West Australian cars, and yet we aren't putting anything across the Nullarbor. You know, it doesn't make sense to me. Lots in South Australia would be going as, you know, coming across if they could.
Well, that was the first Model X to go across Nullarbor.
Oh.
That's a Model S that went round Australia. That's mine. That also did the same.
What years was that?
Mine was, I was there on the 18th of November, 2018.
And so the others were 18 as well?
Yes. Steve Burrell, who's also known as, this is his first time around Australia, but his second time across Nullarbor, because he actually did it on just 10 amp outlets when he bought his car. I think he picked it up in Melbourne and drove it across to Perth. That was August 2018.
Tesla wouldn't let me do that.
Oh, that's a shame.
I was pissed off. I wanted to be, there goes me.
Is that you there? Oh yeah, it is too.
Yep.
So yeah, you had to share with someone else. That's appalling.
I did terrible.
Of all the places, you'd think that Horsham would be only, yeah, anyway, that's a bit ironic. There you go, 6th of March 2020. That's just before the big C word.
Yeah, it was in between fires and lockdown.
Wow.
See, so there goes another one. So it was quite popular while I was there. That might have been on the way back, actually. I can't remember.
So that's you there on the right.
Yep, on the right. So that's 2 times. I think I was, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then obviously no one since, because, well, we can't go there. So, well, sorry, we're free to leave. We just can't come back. But yeah, so Horsham's an example of a so-called temporary installation that's been viable for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very doable for WA.
Yeah, and that's what we suggested. We suggested that you just, you know, you could put a sled at Merredin, one at Southern Cross, one at Jurien Bay, one at Geraldton, you know, Kojonup, Williams, Esperance. You could basically put effectively temporary superchargers everywhere, and then challenge the owners to use them. And if they don't use them, like Warrnambool, they lose them.
Yeah, yeah. Is that what happened in Warrnambool?
Yes. Yeah, it was moved away. Presumably because Warrnambool's sort of on a road to nowhere. Well, not road to nowhere, but it's a road less travelled, and clearly there wasn't enough usage, and they moved it to somewhere else. Or sorry, they removed it.
Probably a very good thing for the state, because the state it's unknown. We know, I think there's a lot more demand there than people realise, but we may be wrong.
No. Well, the thing is, you know, we've had members that have gone to Exmouth,
yeah,
or to Coral Bay,
yeah,
and they've had to do it the hard way. Which
and
is,
I'd love to get up there.
which is, you know, as you know, James, it's a hard slog when you're on AC charging, because it's super slow, and it changes your whole behaviour, because if you want to get from A to B in the shortest possible time, you have to actually drive slower to spend less time on the side of the road charging up. Whereas if you've got a supercharger, Bjorn Nyland a couple of years ago worked out that your optimum speed, if you've got a supercharger, is something like 300 and something kilometers per hour. Or, you know, it's irrelevant. It's like, but for us, the optimum speed is something like 70 kilometers an hour, or even a bit slower than that.
Yeah. Well, certainly, that was my experience, because going across the Nullarbor, you know, to get across to South Australia, it was very slow, and I was averaging for the first couple of days probably only about 75 to 80 k's an hour. But as soon as I got to Keith, it was just road speed the whole way, and it was just drive 110, stop for 20 minutes, drive for 110, stop for 20 minutes. Yeah.
I went from Perth to Carnarvon, which is 907 kilometres, and that took 7 hours and 5 minutes of daytime charging on that one day. I drove, you know, 2 weeks later from Canberra to Melbourne to Keith, which was 1,200 kilometres, and it took less than 2.5 hours of supercharging. And that was part of that 2.5 hours was me overcharging in Melbourne, because I was talking to the service centre guys. So I stayed there longer than optimum, but you know, I was chatting, so it didn't matter.
Well, you read they just travelled the length of England, 1.5 hours charging.
Yes, in the Model 3, yes. And that was 3 guys in the car too, so that's extra load. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, dead right. So it just changes your whole experience. You know, outside of Canberra, it was not Yass. Where's the dog on the tucker box?
Gundagai.
That was the first stop, and I literally plugged in, and right next door there was some chain restaurant. I forget what it's called. They do breakfast and stuff. I basically ordered a coffee and scrambled eggs. And that took 10 minutes exactly from when I plugged in to when I got it. And my watch went off saying, you know, the car had notified me that it was ready to go. So then I just disconnected, hopped in the car, and ate breakfast on my lap while going down the Hume Highway on autopilot. You know, so a whole 10 minutes of supercharging to the next one. So, you know, 2.5 hours over 1,200 Ks. You know, for men of a certain age, that's just perfect, because you need to do, you know, wee-wees and have a bite to eat or whatever.
The other thing, the advantage of the superchargers is you don't have to drive at night. And I end up wiping out a kangaroo on my trip, and that would not have happened if I could have avoided driving at night. But just to get to my destination, I just had to do it. Yeah,
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, when I went round in 19 days, I sort of avoided the night, because it's just, there's just too many hoppies and crawlies and cows, kangaroos, camels, wombats.
James, did you have much damage to your car?
Yes. I ended up with 3 insurance claims on that trip and $18,000 worth of damage.
Wow.
I got a new bumper, new windscreen, new roof glass, new rear vision mirror, and everything on the front of the car other than that was repainted. But I had the Kangaroo wiped out. No, the Kangaroo finished off the bumper. It was already written off, and he wrote off the bonnet. A guy in Falls Creek had reversed into me and driven off, and he had punctured the front bumper, so he was the one that really ruined it. And then previous to that, I'd had a truck going the other way, spraying me with gravel, and it was just amazing. It was like a hailstorm, and that broke the windscreen, broke the glass roof, and damaged all the panels on the front.
Harold, I got really close to Roo on the way home from Lake Grace.
Yeah.
Because it was just after sunset, and it just hopped right in front, and it just happened to be I was just rummaging around for an apple.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a split second of I hit the brakes fairly hard, but if I had looked down.
Yeah. I had a co-driver on that part of the trip, and it was the only part of the trip we saw kangaroos, and in the 200k strip of road we saw 120 kangaroos, and so I hit the very first one we saw, and I missed the second one by probably about a metre. He didn't move. My driver just yelled out, "Stop," and I slammed on the brakes, and the kangaroo didn't move. He just stood there. So it was very nearly number 2. Yeah. And that was because all the feed was at the side of the road. So they were actually coming to the side of the road, whereas everywhere else on my trip, there was no feed at the side of the road. So the roos were way off in the bush.
Makes sense.
I was just outside of Mount Isa. I think that's right. Going to Cloncurry, where I was staying overnight, and it just turned nighttime, and it was really stormy. And just out of Mount Isa, there's like a cutting in one of the hills. So there's only about a metre either side of the road before there's like sheer, granite or whatever that's been cut out. And it was dark, driving along, and suddenly I see this black mass just to the left of me, and I realized at the last moment it was like this huge black Angus bull that was just grazing on a bit of grass or something, just a bit of stubble or whatever on the side of the road. He was probably about a foot from my wing mirror, and had he turned his head simply to his left, I would have just smacked it, and I only saw it at that last moment because it was a black cow, in the blackness.
The kangaroo I hit, there was a oncoming truck, so I dipped my lights, and this kangaroo, we review him on the camera. He comes out from the left, and he's less than 5 meters. We can't see him until I'm about 5 meters away from him. There's no way you could miss him, and he just goes straight into the car. It's actually wonderful footage. I'll post it up for you because it is quite amazing.
Speaking of wonderful footage, in a weird sort of way, have you guys seen the footage of that fox that fell from the top of that tunnel in Melbourne?
No.
Basically, this guy's just driving along, and suddenly like this huge body sort of just comes out of nowhere, like it comes from above, and he's going forwards, and it just basically smashes his windscreen, and it sort of bounces back. And it's not until he looked at the rear footage that you could see what it was, and it was actually a fox that had fallen off the top of like the hill that the tunnel was sort of dug through, and just fell horizontally into the windscreen in midair. Like he struck it while it was falling. So the coincidence is extraordinary. And yeah, it's when you see it sort of bounced off and then going over the back of the car in the rear camera footage of the dash cam that you could tell that it was most likely like a fox that must have been walking along the threshold of the top of the tunnel and just fallen off, and just at random being hit by a Tesla with dash cam.
This kangaroo, he hits the bonnet, and then he goes over the roof, and I capture him on the side camera as he's coming down, and he's like a cat. He's spinning around and trying to, with his tail as a weight, he's trying to land on his feet. Doesn't quite make it, but then he continues to spin. But it is quite phenomenal to just see how the animal is actually going through the air almost gracefully.
Yes.
And trying to land. Yeah.
Just a last macabre note before we go. I will try and dig it up, but I've actually got photos of my mother and I between Port Hedland and Karratha driving an old Valiant in 1979-ish, just near Wim Creek. It's the Port Hedland side of Wim Creek. And we hit a horse at 110 just on dusk. And there were two that went across, and we hit the second one full speed because they were galloping. And yeah, just made a mess of the car. Just basically turned, you know how you got the top part of the windscreen or the top part of the roof, had folded it into a V, so that if I was looking to my right, because I was a passenger, I could not see my mother because the roof was caved in a V. And that was the old days of safety glass. So there's not laminated windscreens. So I had sandals, which were kind of quite useless when there's just glass everywhere. And I had to get out, and she had to get out. Oh no, she couldn't get out, sorry. We had to wait for a truck to pull up behind us to get a crowbar open her door, because the frame had sort of like bent and bound the door. So yeah, so whether it's kangaroos, wombats, camels, horses, cows,
eagles.
Yes.
I nearly wiped out an eagle going across.
Yeah, it's so yeah. Don't drive at night. That's the tip, or dawn or dusk. Oh man. But on that note, hey, it's on a very long battery day, night or day. It might be a good time to adjourn to maybe next week.
Sounds good.
So thanks everyone for coming. Enjoy the rest of your week. And yeah, maybe next week we'll have some more digestible battery day stuff, and yeah, see what happens.
I'll probably feed through a few of my sort of 2000 photos or something, just which are Tesla oriented, and sort of I'm just looking through some of them now. So
yeah, looking forward to it, Pete, and have a good safe trip.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, tell us all about it next week.
Yeah.
Where are you off to?
Cool.
No, I was going. We're going to Popenyening, which is 200 k's, and then next week to Esperance.
Nice.
So we'll see all these charges that the Williams and the Coolin and Narrogin, whatever it is, Ravensthorpe.
Lake Grace.
Yeah, I'm not sure going to Lake Grace. Anyway, whatever.
Well, it won't be far. So yeah, excellent. We look forward to hearing about it next week. So safe travel.
It's not a sort of trip around Australia. This is really just a sort of a yeah.
Still an adventure.
A travel of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So you got to start somewhere.
Today is my
One small
anniversary.
step for a Tesla and so. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Today I have my car for 1 year exactly, and 21,000 kilometers.
Well done.
Happy with
awesome. That. Happy anniversary. Well, happy birthday, whatever. On that note, we're going. All right, guys, take care. Catch you next week.
Yeah.
Cheers. See ya.
See you guys.